Pity poor Tevye, not because he's the father of 5 daughters, but because he is so bound to his traditions. Here in Anatevka, we have traditions for everything, he tells us. Without traditions, our lives would be as shaky as a fiddler on the roof. And if you know the story, you know that it's the tale of a man, a little town, a culture that is trying desperately to hold on to its traditions, while all around them the world is changing. Each step along the way, Tevye is challenged to examine his traditions, and he's called to make a choice to either try to hold on to them or to let them go. And let them go he does, slowly, reluctantly. He allows one of his daughters to marry for love instead of through an arranged marriage, as is the tradition. He offers a blessing to another daughter who decides to leave the village, unheard of, to leave the village to be with her husband. And then finally, in the ultimate letting go of tradition, Tevye packs his bags, leaves the village, and moves to America. Fiddler on the Roof shows us how painful it can be to lose our traditions, and somehow and sometimes how it's our only choice. I've had my own Tevye moments over the years, and not because I'm the father of 2 daughters, but one happened just a couple of years ago around Christmas time. As our girls were growing up, it was a beloved holiday tradition that we would all gather around the television and watch the movie It's a Wonderful Life. For several years, this is what we would do. We would get around the television and we'd watch Jimmy Stewart and Donna Reed dancing on the edge of that swimming pool and then fall in, and we'd watch them fall in love and honeymoon in that broken down old house, and well, you probably know the rest of the story. When the girls got older and when they came back from college, we'd still honor this tradition and sit around the TV and watch the movie. And when they got married, they'd bring their husbands. The tradition continued. It was a time of reconnecting for us, a time of reminiscing, remembering Christmases past. But the past few years have been different. It started with some of us, and I won't name names, but some of us falling asleep during the movie. Then came some generalized resistance, even suggestions of watching other holiday movies. And finally there was outright revolt. Dad, you can watch that movie for the umpteenth time if you want, but we're going out. And like Tevye, I dug my heels in every step of the way. I kidded and cajoled, grasping desperately to try to hold on to this tradition that I loved. I tried every way I could think of to keep it from disappearing, until eventually I came to terms with the fact that it had outlived its useful life, and like another character in another movie called Old Yeller, it just needed to be put down. I now accept that where that tradition is concerned, I'm Tevye, an emigrant from the old country, moved to America. To differing degrees, I think we're all Tevyes, struggling to hold on to cherished traditions amidst a world that is changing faster than we can scarcely believe. Traditions serve a useful purpose, in fact, many, particularly in a rapidly changing society. Traditions remind us of who we are. They help to create and sustain our identity. Whether it's identity as members of a particular family, of a certain culture or society, or members of a certain religion, traditions help us to remember where we came from. And because most traditions are acted out in some way, we don't just hold them in our heads, we act them out through rituals or practices. Traditions are the physical manifestation of our beliefs and the physical manifestation of our connection with the past. They're the way that we embody and experience those roots. I remember going to the North End in Boston one day. The North End is where there's a large Italian-American population. And we were sitting in a coffee shop sipping our cappuccinos when we watched a parade go by. The focal point of the parade was a statue, a religious icon that was being carried on the shoulders of several people. I didn't know who the statue was of, I still don't know, but it was a feast day, a saint's day. And as the statue was paraded down the street, people were clamoring to get close to it. They were pushing and shoving in a joyful celebration and pasting dollar bills onto the statue. It was, as I say, a joyful celebration. And this is a celebration that was reenacted year after year, and I'm sure it was imported from Italy many generations previously. Now for us, as outsiders, the parade was an entertaining spectacle. It was an interesting diversion in our day because we were outsiders looking in. We didn't fit in. But for those whose identity was connected to and defined by this tradition, it held great meaning. Religious traditions serve this same purpose of reminding us who we are. Practicing Catholics cherish the Mass, which links them directly and immediately to the Passion of Jesus and to the Last Supper. Religious practices, religious rituals help us to embody our beliefs, whether it's through turning toward Mecca and praying 5 times a day or lighting a chalice on Sunday morning. These traditions are visible, tangible symbols of our beliefs and our values. Rituals, as the acting out of religious tradition, serves another function as well. It serves to comfort us. When we walk into a house of worship, our house of worship, whatever form that may take, we know what to expect. We can count on it being like it was in the weeks and months and perhaps years preceding. We know what to expect from a particular worship experience. And that's at least part of the reason that we feel nurtured and refreshed after worship. And religious ritual helps us to feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to experience the joy or sorrow that we have in our hearts, to experience the joy and the sorrow through compassion that others have, to experience the bonds of community. In worship, we're vulnerable enough to be willing to open ourselves up to the indwelling of the holy, the mystery that we call God or love. This is the reason that changes in our worship experience can be so challenging. These traditions ground us, and when they're disturbed, it can be a nearly seismic event, shifting the ground beneath our feet. It leaves us feeling, at a minimum, unsettled and disoriented, and sometimes even angry. Although I was just a young boy when it happened, I remember the uproar and the outrage in the Catholic Church when, after Vatican II, the priest was turned around and faced the pews and was saying the Mass not in Latin, but in English. It was an amazing transformation that took place, and it was not an easy change. It was a loss for so many people because it didn't fit with the tradition. We need traditions for all sorts of reasons, to connect us with our culture and our history, to remind us of our identity, to ground us and give us something we can count on in an ever-changing world. But tradition has a downside, perhaps even a dark side, too. As easily as traditions can reinforce positive practices, they can perpetuate negative or even harmful habits. When traditions become hidebound, when we maintain traditions without thinking about them and their significance, or when the reason we keep engaging in a practice is, well, because we've always done it that way, then they lose their meaning. And sometimes they're actually harmful. They can perpetuate stereotypes that have been outmoded. Instead of grounding us, some traditions bog us down in the muck and mire of the past. Just because something has a long history doesn't make it right or good. Take, for example, our celebration of Columbus Day. While those of us of a certain age were taught to celebrate Christopher Columbus's so-called discovery of America, we now know that A, America and its indigenous people were already here and didn't need discovering. B, that Columbus kind of unwittingly ran into the continent when he was looking for something else. And C, that the exercise of colonial power isn't such a great thing, especially for those aforementioned indigenous people. And yet, we continue to celebrate Columbus Day as a national holiday. I wonder why that is. I wonder why. The great philosopher Socrates reminded us that the unexamined life is not worth living, and I think this applies to our traditions as well. We need to examine our traditions from time to time and make sure that they still are valid and valuable, that they affirm not just who we have been and where we've come from, but who we aspire to be as well. Our traditions must align with our values so that our practices align with our preaching. The grounding that tradition gives us should be a pad from which we launch ourselves into flight, not a swamp that holds us down in the slough of antiquated ideas. Our traditions must be life-affirming, life-renewing, life-sustaining. And like a living, breathing organism, they must be firm but facile, strong enough to stand on, but flexible enough to respond to our evolving needs. Here in our Unitarian Universalist Church, we sometimes say that we have a living tradition. And if you look at the cover of your hymnal, it's called Singing the Living Tradition. Singing the Living Tradition. When we talk about the 6 sources of inspiration available to us, we say the living tradition we share draws from many sources. The living tradition we share. And at our annual General Assembly every year, we have a service that's called the Service of the Living Tradition. And so I wonder, what does it mean to be part of a living tradition? To be living, for me, is to be present to what is happening around us. To be living is to be responsive to our environment. To be living, at least with consciousness and self-awareness, is to engage our imaginations and creativity. To be living is both to remember our past and to dream of our future. And so a living tradition must be a tradition that embodies all these characteristics: aware, responsive, imaginative and creative, grounded in history and forward-looking. Today you've heard about the Chalice Lighters program and how it contributes to the growth of our congregations and the growth of Unitarian Universalism. I'm so glad to be one of the Chalice Lighters who pays it forward, and I hope that you'll consider becoming a Chalice Lighter as well. But right now I want to talk about the lighting of the chalice as a tradition of ours. The physical lighting of our chalice when we get together for worship on Sunday morning, when we have meetings together, when we're at memorial services or weddings. This is a cherished tradition of Unitarian Universalist congregations. This weekly ritual grounds us and reminds us that we are part of something larger than ourselves, because as we light our chalice, there are 1,000 other congregations across the country and around the globe who are lighting their chalices as well. And the chalice, lighting the chalice, connects us to our history, because the flaming chalice symbol was created during World War II to help free the Jews and others from Nazi oppression. And so we're linked to that history every time we light the chalice, a history of freedom and justice and providing sanctuary to the oppressed. But perhaps the most significant aspect of this tradition of the flaming chalice is that it's a symbol that's open to interpretation. It's open to interpretation. Unlike many other religious symbols, it doesn't point to a particular person or a particular event. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to bring to this tradition of lighting the chalice our own meaning. The chalice flame is informed by and invested with the hearts and spirits of those who are drawn together as the gathered community. Each time it's lit, each time this flame is lit, it summons the incarnation of a new community. A community of hope, a community of love, of peace, of justice. It represents what we need it to represent at the time of the gathering. So lighting our chalice is an act that manifests what we mean by the phrase a living tradition. Each week in this particular church, we engage in another tradition as well. And while other congregations do, this particular tradition hasn't become as universal a practice as has lighting our chalice. And that tradition is singing the hymn, Spirit of Life. And as we know, this hymn includes the inspiring words, "Roots hold me close, wings set me free." Roots hold me close, wings set me free. I wonder what image or images that those words evoke for you. For me, the words create a kind of tension, actually. Roots hold me close conjures up a picture of a tree, a great oak, perhaps, with roots that go deep down into the ground and bind it fast to the soil. And wings set me free. Wings set me free calls to mind a great, majestic bird, perhaps taking off from the branches of that tree. But these are two separate images for this one musical phrase. And so the challenge, I think, that Carolyn McDade, the author of that hymn, has given us is to try to merge the images. To picture a tree with wings or a bird with roots. And she asks us to consider, can we be rooted and grounded as we take to the sky? Can we fly while also keeping our feet firmly planted, drawing nourishment from the soil? This hymn challenges us to honor and respect our past, our origins, our roots, while simultaneously spreading our wings to fly into the future with creativity and imagination. Pity poor Tevye, not because he is the father of 5 daughters, but because he is so bound to his traditions. And not to just any traditions, but to traditions that are hard and fast, like a pair of concrete shoes. Tevye's traditions are deeply, firmly rooted, but they're without wings. And he's left stranded and stuck. May we claim together those traditions that offer us both roots and wings, that we may stay grounded as we seek to soar. This day and every day I wish you peace. Amen.